Hello, and welcome back to the Lorna Whiston Schools podcast, the place where we connect with parents from around the globe to share our experiences on a variety of topics. We are a leading school and have been based in Singapore for over 40 years. We specialize in developing a lifelong love for learning, and our focus is on working with our parents to develop their children's 21st century skills, transforming them into the talented, critical thinkers of tomorrow. I am your host, Renee Stone, head of Lorna Whiston Schools, and I'm delighted to be speaking with our guest, Carlos Fernandez. Carlos is an entrepreneur, innovator, and public policy advisor. Carlos recently founded Next Opus Ventures and currently spends his time on education projects aligned around three core goals: helping kids believe, helping kids tinker, and helping kids learn. In 2006, Carlos invented and patented the world's first legal internet-based digital video recorder, Record TV. The company founded by Carlos is widely regarded as one of the few companies on the forefront of disrupting the TV industry and was named as one of the top 100 startups in the world by Red Herring magazine. It is a pleasure to have you with us today, Carlos.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Wonderful. So today in our podcast, we'll be focusing on a really deep question. How do I nurture my child's passion? Now, we know that that's multifaceted, but we're really thankful that you're here today to help answer from your experience. And I shared just a little bit of your experience. There's plenty more to go with that, but just to give our viewers the opportunity to understand your background and what really inspires you. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself, what drives you. Would you be able to share that with us, Carlos?
Thank you so much, Renee. Great question. Let me start. I think we are who we are because of who our parents are.
Yeah, definitely.
And I had a great childhood. My father, is a marine engineer, so he sailed on the ship.
Right.
My mother would join him, and I would join them as well. So I missed actually a whole lot of school. I was never formally, homeschooled, or should I say ship schooled. But I did a lot of my schooling through my mom teaching me on the ship. And I was always officially enrolled with a school. And I remember my mother telling me that I'm going to teach you for 2 hours a day, and you're really slacking off compared to everyone else in school because they're doing from 9 to 3:30. You're doing from 9 to 11.
Right.
And, and I was blissfully unaware of what it entailed. And I was like really grateful that I was getting to, chill out. But I learned so much through those 2 hours.
Right.
And then I'd go back to school and I did very well. But I think it was a lot of it was driven through that experience. And then I had the experience of, going to all these different countries. And this was, we're talking about late 70s, early 80s, when it was, far, it was a very unusual lifestyle.
Right.
And I just learned a lot from that. And my father's an engineer, my mother's an artist. My father's also an artist. They both do sculpture. They did painting at the time. And I grew up in this environment where there was a lot of energy around discussing creative and practical or technical ideas because my dad was a marine engineer. So anything from how do you redesign the bathroom to accommodate this and to make it look interesting, to how do you design this the sculpture, or so it was a big part of my life. And a lot of that interplayed both the engineering and the art, right? Together. So even till today, my dad does sculptures that are these ballerinas that, they weigh about 20 kilos, but they stand on their toes with like 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter square surface area under their feet. So there was this very interesting interaction between these multiple dimensions.
Right.
And I didn't know the significance of that growing up.
Okay.
I mean, this was my home. This was all I knew, right?
Sure.
And but as I grew up, and as I, today looking back, over 40 years ago, you sort of realize that these things made huge differences.
Sure.
These these tiny fleeting moments, these small things that you don't even think are significant when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
And that has really shaped my thinking and my interests, especially now that I have my own kids. And just thinking about, they're going to school regularly, full time. But I've always been fascinated by the whole homeschooling ideology. Now,
Right.
obviously, my wife and I both work, so we can't actually homeschool, but we've had hired teachers to come over when they were as young as 2, and just to sort of help expand their horizons, that sort of thing.
Sure. Sure.
And I think it really helped. Both of them are members of Mensa, and we thought we
Mhm.
wanted to sort of capitalize on the abilities they have without also compromising our own, lifestyles and schedules. So there was this underlying interest that we had. And when COVID happened, it was very interesting. When COVID happened, I discovered that the schools weren't really ready for that transition. And what was happening is, with the kids were essentially getting homework. And my kids go to an international school, but they were essentially just getting homework, and they were doing it on their own for the
Right.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And that really got me thinking about, in this remote universe, right? Like, there must be a better way, right? There must be, instead of looking at it, as some sort of regression, is there a way we could make things actually better living in this, internet sort of universe?
Right.
And that's when I sort of expanded a family project that went back. Actually, now we're going, instead of COVID, back to 2017,
Okay.
when we went for a holiday to Sri Lanka with the family. And we went whale watching. The kids loved
Amazing. Yeah.
they loved the experience. They had so many questions. Then we went back to the hotel at the end of the day, and I happened to connect with some friends there. So I'm part of this young global leader community at the World Economic Forum. And so I've had the opportunity to meet such just amazing, terrific people that I learned from. And one of my regrets is that, I should have heard from you when I was like 10 years old. Now what's the point,
Right.
Now I'm not going to change a career or something. And so it just, and this was one of those really fleeting moments. I was just leaving the hotel room, and I spoke to the kids. I was like, do you guys want to join me? I'm speaking to this friend of mine, or grabbing a coffee with her, and she's she's a world renowned expert when it comes to whales, and she's a marine biologist, and she discovered this new subspecies, if I recall correctly, of whales. And they're like, yeah, we'd love to come down. So they came
Amazing.
down. They were 5 and 7, or 5 and, I think 5 and 7, or 6 and 7, 6 and 8, maybe around that.
Right.
It's becoming a blur right now. But and they asked a bunch of questions. Frankly, none of the questions were unimaginable. They were just regular questions that they could have found those answers on Wikipedia, for example.
Right. Sure. But they had an expert in front of them, so it made it so real for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It just made that experience real. I think speaking to a marine biologist, just what is her life like? That added a whole different dimension, which was something I didn't expect.
Right.
Because I've been in the technology space, I've been in video, and I'm like, what's the difference between watching a video and sitting in front of someone, right? Like,
sure.
It's fundamentally more or less the same thing. But that sort of interaction, and it's not just about answering the questions, right? It's about
absolutely
thinking about it, feeling, and making it proximate. I think what I realize that's really important is proximity to success.
right.
And the importance of proximity cannot be understated. And you have like Nobel Prize winners that have their, and then they have children that also become Nobel Prize winners, right? Like, what's the statistical likelihood of one Nobel Prize winner, and another Nobel Prize winner from the same family, right? But what happens is that they understand that universe.
Right.
They have these, there are all these different insights into how these worlds operate. We all operate in different worlds, right? And if Bill Clinton talks about, in his biography, shaking hands with John F. Kennedy, and how that moment inspired him to enter a life of public service and eventually become president. And there are astronauts that talk about this. There's one astronaut I heard recently, he was talking about why did he want to become an astronaut. He said, he was a child and his dad woke him up to see the moon landing. And like, his dad was never impressed with anything. And, the moon landing was such a big deal.
Right.
And he was like, and at that moment, it was like, this is amazing, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Sometimes it's also about just being so enthusiastic about certain things, and that discovery that sort of flows through the kids. Through that experience, I started taking them out on travels, sometimes, for a conference, and they would, if I knew friends that were organizing the conference, they would, they'd join, they'd ask some questions. And and they did 3 or 4 interviews. One of my friends is a Grammy Award winning cellist. His name is Dana Leong. Fantastic guy, just amazing with what work he does. And he's been an inspiration to me. But I'm not going to pick up the cello, right?
Right.
Or play the violin. And I was like, what? Maybe my kids should speak to him. Maybe, they weren't learning the cello, they were learning the violin. Now my son has been dabbling in it. And, I don't expect them to achieve that greatness, but it just brings that world together.
Right.
Yeah. And he talked about, getting the cello and how much, his, how much he had to work with his mom, and she trained him, and this just beautiful stories, right? And so we did these interviews in an ad hoc way, traveling, sometimes with friends I knew arrived here. This friend of mine, she runs a company listed on the NYSE, hugely successful company in the tech space and the cybersecurity space. So my kids interviewed them. And, when this COVID hit, I said, why don't you guys just skip school, right? Because you guys already know that material, right?
Right.
Anyway, it's homework, right? So why don't you do other homework, which is essentially interview people, right? So I hooked them up with some interviews, and, today they've done about 40, 45 interviews. They've interviewed, Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia. They've interviewed, Bob Langer, the founder of Moderna. They interviewed the Prime Minister of Haiti. They interviewed, the inventor of the internet, Vint Cerf. They've done only one interview in Singapore, but they interviewed the CEO of DBS Bank, Piyush Gupta, and Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, multiple Olympic, gold medalists. Paralympic medalists, some of the world's greatest people. And we have like some videos on youtube.com/rookie reporter. And you can see like there's a 2-minute sample of, some of the interviews they did last year, and they've done many more this year. And these interviews are long, right? They're not 10, 15-minute interviews.
Right.
They started at 20, but now they cross an hour often, right?
Amazing.
Most recently, they did an interview with the youngest winner of 2 Academy Awards. I think she won 2 Academy Awards, individual Academy Awards by the time she was 35. She's won multiple Emmys. And she's been doing documentaries on Southeast Asian stories, Pakistani women, and, some of the social issues around that. And then, they also did an interview with Jay Naidu, who was the first minister who worked for Nelson Mandela. And he handled, and Jay Naidu was the minister who handled the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So they sort of learned about apartheid, and they asked him questions. And his interview was really interesting because he obviously talked a lot about the race issues, but in the freedom struggle, they had a non-violent approach, and he was part of the non-violent approach. Then he joined the approach that was okay with some degree of violence, right?
Right.
And that was a really difficult question, that he helped answer the kids. How do you handle that? The whole non-violence was, and these are really complex, big issues. And eventually, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission happened, he wanted to heal the country, and how he sort of helped architect that. And that he did that with, I think, Cardinal Desmond Tutu, who won a Nobel Peace Prize for that as well. The interviews are amazing in multiple ways. It's good for the kids, but it's also fantastic for us, because I sat behind, and what we've done is, I'd say, from a third party perspective, interviewed all these people, because we're not actually there, we're not actually interviewing, but we're hearing these stories, and you can sort of see across the commonality of success, right?
Right.
People, all the amazing stuff they've done.
Sure.
And that is, you see that the ages sometimes before 10, before 12 are just so crucial.
Yes.
In making these moments happen.
Right.
That can have lasting, outsized impacts for decades to come. Right.
Absolutely.
And so the thing that, coming to your question, what drives me is, you look at the world today, and some of the world's biggest challenges that are upon us, whether it is equality, climate change, or all the other things that we're dealing with. And I think, there are probably hundreds of Elon Musks out there, or people with that. There are hundreds of Bill Gates out there. There are hundreds. And wouldn't it be fantastic if we could help those 100 know they're those 100?
Right, sure.
And taking them on that voyage of self-discovery.
Yes.
Because, the world is losing out if we don't capitalize on the people we have.
Right.
And it's impossible that, we will never succeed in tapping the full of humanity's ability, but we can do far, far more, right, than what we've already done.
Right.
And I think that is what excites me. And it's like, how can you make this real? How can kids feel that this is real? I could be this. People ask me, is this tech focused? Is this not tech focused? It's, we've interviewed a lot of tech entrepreneurs, but it's not only about tech, right? Whether it's about music, or whether it's about how do you win a Pulitzer Prize when it comes to editorial cartooning, right?
Right.
I mean, things like that. Because there are all these latent talents that sometimes kids never discover, right? And parents don't know what to encourage. They only know this small segment of stuff. And it's also heavily driven by the news. Cybersecurity jobs are out there. And yes, cybersecurity is a great career, but there's all this other stuff going on. And you sort of need to build that curiosity, drive that that interest.
Right. Carlos, sorry. I was just going to say, driving that interest and that passion, I can hear it in your voice. And to conduct 40 to 45 interviews already for your children is not an easy task, because I can imagine hours and hours of research, high level thinking to ask exactly the right questions, and to think about how to also engage with the audience. There's so many approaches and things to consider. So kudos to your children for doing that. That is just amazing. And their knowledge is going to increase so much on so many things, having those experiences.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because it's not just about the interview.
Right. Absolutely.
The part is preparing for the interview.
Right.
You can't, for example, and I'll go back to Jay Naidu, the example with him. You can't just go and say, interview him. He was a minister in South Africa, right? You need to know about, what inspired him to get into public service. What, he had a mentor who brought him on, what was his relationship with Mandela like, what was the inequalities and injustices he experienced as a child, what was the history of South Africa at the time.
Yes.
And then all this learning that goes into it, right?
Yeah.
And so a big part of it is, and now it's so initially the kids the kids look at Wikipedia, they look at the interviews, my wife, supports them as well. With that,
Right.
I help, arranging the interviews. But it's a lot of work that they do. And I think a lot of work is, just the research as well. And then
Sure.
there is the whole preparation and, sort of rehearsing the questions they're going to ask, the sequence of those questions. Then they do the interview. And then after that, they spend some time reflecting on it in video. Those videos aren't, shared publicly, but they reflect on what they thought. It's just like an immediate short conversation, but it sort of helps make those connections, what surprised them in the interview. So I think
Right.
it's a really significant, effort. Um,
Absolutely.
and people ask me, how long does it take you to get some of the interviews? And I say, it depends on whether it takes me either 15 minutes or 15 years.
Right. Right.
So the actual request for the interview email takes 15 minutes, but
Yeah,
the
the effort.
take to get that to that point has
Mm-hmm.
taken a very long time. So
Right.
so that's what I mean. That's what we're doing, and it's been a fabulous family project.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, at Lorna Western Schools, I know that we would have so many parents who would be interested in giving their children a bit of experience like you've given your children. So, getting to meet different people, to talk to these highly successful people in any field. So, is there a way that our parents can also provide that same experience for their children?
So that's a good question, and believe me, this is a question that has been coming up for like the last 8 or 9 months, right?
I'm sure,
I've
yeah.
put those videos out. Many of my friends have asked that same question. I think the fact is that it is difficult. It takes a
Sure.
lot of time.
Absolutely.
There is the arranging of the interviews, then there's this preparing this different sets of material,
Right.
curating it and everything. So I've been, we've been thinking about that, and one of the things that we've decided to do right now is sort of deliver this as a structured program.
Great.
So that other parents can sort of have their kids just sign up for something for this program. We're calling it Rookieverse, right?
Great.
Basically, rookies learning everything all across the universe, essentially.
That's amazing. I love that title, Rookieverse.
And so we're looking at structuring it as, lessons which include, pre-recorded lessons, a live teacher, giving assistance to the kids and the questions they may have. And then participating in this webinar style interview where they, raise their hands and they get to ask questions over a period of time, vote for other people's questions, that sort of thing. And then the last, thing over 4 weeks or over 8 weeks, we structure this program.
Right.
And we do a career over that period, right? And we'll keep doing new careers with, maybe, what is it like to be an influencer, for example, right?
Right.
What is it like to be a gamer or be, so one of the, people that we're interviewing is a very senior exec as one of these large gaming companies, right? I don't want to mention.
Oh, amazing. The students will love that.
Exactly.
Yes.
To run product in a massive, publicly listed gaming company, right?
Amazing. Yes.
And so those are some of the things that, we've been thinking about and working on. We're just going to keep getting these guests, and the material will continuously be, customized for each of these guests, because, there'll be teachers that help with each of these guests.
Right.
And we'll also have, over time, we'll probably also share like a pre-recorded library for other videos and other interviews that we've done previously. But this is a very hands-on, being involved program where kids can get those experiences that will solve, for 3 objectives that we have. One is to inspire them.
Right.
2 is to educate them in terms of specifically how things work. In the past, Bob Langer did it, the founder of Moderna did it for my kids, where he talked about how mRNA vaccines work. So just imagine, my kids' experience with, listening from the person.
Amazing. Yeah.
Moderna talk about mRNA vaccines, right?
Right.
And I think the last thing, which is really important, is
Hmm.
these people become relatable.
Yes, absolutely.
we
Hmm.
want we want kids to see themselves
Mm,
in the giants of today,
ab-
right?
absolutely.
And and whether it is, so there are some questions like, were you naughty as a kid? Right? Or
That was one of my favorite ones that I heard your children ask, and they were like, there's something common in all of these people we've been speaking to. I loved it because it's so relatable and it's so interesting that they're asking these questions because their audience could be adults or children, and they're really curious to find out that answer. Were you, Carlos?
before I answer that, but let me just tell you one thing.
Sure.
They have stopped asking that question.
Okay.
And they've stopped asking that question because they did interview after interview, hoping that they would say they were naughty as children. And except for one person who said he was naughty only when he was 4 and 5 years old, none of them, they said, they did the usual childhood stuff, but none of them said they were naughty. And so kids discovered that, this is a dumb question to ask people that are successful, and especially in front of your parents, because they can't go back and say, he did it, he did it. And that was really funny that they decided to stop asking that question on their own.
Yeah, well, it's part of that ownership that you're giving them to actually choose their own questions, to prepare it, and then to reflect. Like you were saying, after they do the interviews, they spend that time reflecting on how it went. So it's all so much learning involved in that.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the one question actually where I think they did win was they kept asking every guest what it takes to get a pet, and whether those guests would tell their parents to give them a pet. And all the guests talked about responsibility and everything, but eventually we just broke down and we got them a dog. Right?
Oh, they would have been so happy
So,
because like watched the one where your daughter was saying, I'm responsible, but I'm not sure about him, about your son. I thought that was really precious. So that's great. The interview helped them as well. Get a pet.
yeah, I mean, let me just say that as every parent knows, a
Mhm.
certain set of promises are made, but they're never kept. But we kind of expected that going in. But when you ask the same question like so many times, and then it reached the point where some of the guests knew that they had asked that question before, and they're like, get them a pet already, just and, and if you ask that question sufficient number of times, you will get an answer that you want. So
Absolutely, that's true. They figured that out.
so
Very smart.
they won that round. They won that round.
Right. Right. Well, that is amazing. So when does Rookieverse actually start? Is that next month, Carlos, or how soon will our parents be able to also find out about enrolling their child? Are we looking at a November?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
two things we are doing. We're starting the program in January,
Oh,
right?
okay, sure.
And
Great.
kids can and parents can pre-register for that.
Excellent.
I think by the time this podcast is out, that rookieverse.com, which is ROOKIVERSE. So it's not KIE, it's ROOKIVERSE.com will be live, and parents can just pre-register. Pre-registrations for free. If they want to sort of lock in a seat or something, or lock in some discounts, then they can potentially pay like a $50 refundable fee. So
Okay.
that's there
Right.
already. And but what we are doing in October and November is that we are selecting a few children to attend, like, essentially a free trial version of the program that we'll be using their feedback to sort of improve it. So if
Great.
they do pre-register early, that's super useful, because that we will look into that pool, to try to select some of those students.
That's
And it'll be the
amazing.
full experience.
Okay.
It's not going to be a compromised experience. It's going to be a full experience.
Sure.
We may run like a couple of slightly differing full experiences
Okay.
in that period of time. So
Right.
that's another thing that parents might be interested in.
Fabulous. And is that for primary and secondary students?
Yeah. So,
Okay, great.
So there's a 7 to 12 section and there's a 13 to 17 section.
Great.
What we're going to do is we're going to just see the pre-registrations and use some of that data to decide, how many classes we can have to try it out, and what we should do, and that sort of thing. So there's some of that going to happen at the back end, and then we launch full force in January.
What an amazing experience for parents, like to have the experience that your children have had and to be able to talk to very prominent, successful people in that course is an experience once in a lifetime. And as you say, we didn't have that when we were younger. And it would have been so nice to be able to talk to all of these people, to learn from them so that we could have more experiences to draw on when we decided on what we would like to do for our careers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We benefit so much from our parents because we kind of understand that universe, right?
Right.
Help them understand different universes, right?
Yes.
And it also I think it also helps both parents and kids understand each other better through that process. What is the life of an influencer, right? Like some influencers make a lot of money, but the vast majority of them don't. Right. And one of the things that is interesting is there's so much noise in the influencers. Like everyone wants to be a YouTuber, for example.
Right.
And then you have to sort of dig deeper and say, like, okay, why did this person become a professional influencer? Why did it work for this person? And why did it not work? And then what happens is you go through, and that's why the genesis of these ideas is really important, right? Like what got this person attention?
Yes.
Drove that business. And I personally think that kids should discover everything.
Sure.
Probably underexpose themselves to Insta and all that kind of stuff. It has all these other dynamics. Right. But I think that they should know and they should understand how the different universes work, the good and the bad.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
Right? My kids were talking one really interesting influencer, and we found that this influencer has not actually shared his real name to protect his privacy, right?
Right.
And he got really popular because he did some programming and found out something on Minecraft or something that no one had ever done before, right?
Okay.
And so that was how he got some recognition and then built a following. And eventually everyone kind of gravitates to the same thing, right? Like everyone wants to do gaming and you'll have Minecrafters, you'll have Robloxers, you'll have all these different people. But what happens is all of them have very different paths to get there.
Sure, right? Absolutely.
Like, I'm going to play Roblox. And there are millions of kids all playing Roblox, and there are like 20 influencers, right?
Right, sure.
So a good thing to discuss with your kid is say when you want to play, when you want to be an influencer, but why should I watch your channel? Someone else. Right?
Absolutely.
Makes you different.
Yep, right? For sure.
That's a lesson that crosses just influence, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there are all these different careers, these different things that they'll have the opportunity to learn about, and hopefully, it'll spark something. Every interaction won't spark something immediately.
Sure.
Almost all of them will spark something at some time.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it becomes life-defining or not, another question. But even if one becomes life-defining, that's massive.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. For sure.
So, like Steve Jobs. Actually, this is something that Steve Jobs gave this famous speech where he talks about dots. Right? He talks about dropping out of college, and I'd recommend like every parent to watch that video, right?
Okay.
It went viral. He gave it at Stanford, the commencement ceremony. But he talks about how he did a little bit of engineering and how he went to college, didn't like the courses, but then he joined like a calligraphy course right?
Okay.
Totally out of what he had done before. And then he talked about how calligraphy inspired beautiful typefaces for Apple, right? And what he
Mm.
said is really interesting. He said that you have to trust that the dots will connect
Yeah.
when you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have these dots there, right? And when you grow up, they connect to potentially become something wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So my takeaway from that is I agree, but nothing stops us from creating many dots,
Right.
right? So when you have many dots across different areas, and that's exactly what he did, right? He didn't do all his dots in one area.
Sure.
He did calligraphy,
Mm-hmm.
he did some business and sales, and he did some technology stuff, and he connected with, the homebrew club. So what I'm saying is, just as parents, it's our duty to help create these dots,
Yeah.
throw a ton of these dots for these kids, give them the opportunity, and then over time, those dots will connect to be, one of many beautiful things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
different kids will connect those dots differently,
Mm-hmm.
but you just give them more opportunity to connect dots, right? And
Sure.
they are.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and Rookieverse, what a great way to provide them with that opportunity with lots of dots that later can be connected. So, Carlos, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Now, I know that your children have 3 favorite questions that they ask because I like to hear them on the interviews. However, I'm just going to ask you one if that's okay. So, one of my favorite questions that they ask is if you could press a button and change anything in the world, what would you change?
I think the most important thing for me and throughout my life has been equality,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, and equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the world is so asymmetrical, you
Right.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and that asymmetry starts really early on,
Mm.
and if we could give, and the maximum impact of dealing with equality and asymmetry is starting young, right? Because they
Absolutely.
have their lives ahead of them. And the greatest impact one can have is to sort of help fix that problem. And
Yes.
everything I am doing, whether it's Rookieverse or some of the other initiatives, is all about fixing that. And Rookieverse is really about democratizing access. Access
Right.
to people is probably one of the greatest assets people have, even more than
Yes.
money, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
If you can just democratize access to people,
Mm-hmm.
you have this multiplier effect in life. And I think that's one thing that I would like to fix, and trying to do it in my own little way.
Amazing. And it sounds like you and your family have already been making such an impact in that way. So, Carlos, can you please share with us, are there any other initiatives that you are working on at this point of time?
So I'm working on a bunch actually, but I think there's one thing that really stands out and is very close to my heart. I think academics are very important, absolutely.
Sure.
But I think everything is very important, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And what we are launching is something that we are calling the Daring Kids Awards.
I love that title. Great. Tell us more.
It's still a work in progress, but it'll
Okay.
be live soon, and probably by the time this podcast goes up, it'll be out. But it's going to be at daringkids.com. So that's daringkids.com. And the idea is, can we find kids that are doing daring and crazy stuff, right? There was this kid recently that won, an award for a best photograph. He did some amazing photograph. There are kids that are writing poetry. There are kids that are playing sport. There are kids achieving heights in chess. And what we want to do is sort of, you have 40 under 40, you have 30 under 30, but and we're not going to have a specific number, right?
Sure.
But we want to have, we want to identify some of the kids that are doing amazing stuff, right? and also potentially have them interviewed by other kids that may want to conduct those interviews. So, we'll figure those details out. But I think the key is we'd love to have parents, in Singapore and globally, there are parents of kids that are doing just amazing stuff that's completely undiscovered, right?
Right.
And we want to sort of shine the spotlight on their work, right? And because we feel that it's just not given enough attention.
Absolutely. That's going to be an amazing platform to have for these children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, just the idea and the notion that 40 under 40 and all these different communities, many adults participate in them, and there are benefits because there's this attention. It helps connect with certain sets of people. And I think, if kids are doing interesting stuff and they can get some attention, who knows, it may just make them feel good about themselves. Maybe it'll help, schools and universities look at them differently. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's something that I think is something that should have been done a long time ago.
Right.
So that's something that we are working on. And I think, your audience might be interested in that.
Absolutely. You're embracing the holistic child, and that's so important. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Thank you. We are sure our parents will be very interested in that. So that's an exciting project. So it has been an absolute pleasure having you on our podcast today, Carlos. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you. And we hope to get our students having the experience of Rookieverse very soon. It's an amazing experience. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that you have enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed it. Do send us any questions you might have about how your child can be developing their passion in any field in their future. Thank you.